$10? That's exactly what it cost me to sit in the third row of a church and watch my own sister walk down the aisle in my custom wedding dress straight to my fiancé. But here's the ultimate twist. He wasn't looking at her. My name is Chloe. Until 18 months ago, I thought I had the perfect life. I was 28 years old. I worked as a graphic designer in Chicago and was engaged to Liam. Liam was a structural engineer, stable, reliable, and exactly the kind of man you build a foundation with, or so I thought. We were together for 5 years. We survived the distance when he was transferred to Seattle for a year period. We survived adopting a completely unbalanced rescue dog named Buster, and we were supposed to survive a lifetime together, period. Then there was my younger sister, Savannah. Savannah is 3 years younger than me and has always been the undeniable golden child in our family, period, while I was the quiet whiz kid who paid her own way through college. Savannah was the budding influencer who lived in an apartment funded by our parents Salem and Brenda. Whatever Savannah wanted, Savannah got, period. It was an unspoken rule in our household. If I had a toy, she wanted it. If I had a hobby, she had to suddenly master it, period. I always chalked it up to sibling rivalry, never imagining that her toxic lust would extend to the man I would marry. The betrayal didn't happen in the shadows, period. It was a slow, painful car crash that I didn't see coming, period. It started with little things. Savannah suddenly taking an interest in architecture and constantly texting Liam asking for advice on an interior design project that didn't exist. Almost 8. Then came the family dinners where she drank a little too much wine and laughed a little too loudly at his jokes, lightly touching his form. When I mentioned this to Liam, he called me paranoid. She's just friendly, Chloe. She's going to be my sister-in-law, he said, looking at me with those honest brown eyes that I trusted with pride. Period. Wedding planning was in full swing. I had booked my dream venue, the historic Hawthorne estate, paid the non-refundable deposit, and most importantly, I had found the dress, period, and it was a custom creation from a downtown boutique designed by a lovely older woman named Mrs. Gable. It had a sweetheart neckline, delicate lace sleeves that looked like spun sugar, and a train that flowed like water. It was perfection, period. I discovered the truth exactly weeks after my last fitting. I had returned early from a conference in Denver. Buster, our dog, was staying at my parents' house, so the apartment was supposed to be empty. No such thing happened. I walked into my own living room and found Liam and Savannah sitting on the couch. They weren't physically entangled, but the air between them was thick, heavy, and electric. Savannah was crying. Liam had his head in his hands. "What's going on?" I asked, dropping my suitcase. Liam looked up, his face ashen. He couldn't speak. It was Savon who stood up, wiped his eyes, and healed the blow with terrifying, rehearsed calm. "Chloe, Liam and I are in love," she said. "We didn't mean for this to happen. It happened. And I'm pregnant." The room spun. Vividly remember that awful feeling, the world beneath me collapsing. 5 years of shared love, trust, and vibrant dreams, all vaporized in a blink by the person I held dearest, my own flesh and blood. I looked at Liam, praying he'd call her a liar. But he just stared at the floor and whispered, "Nah, I'm so sorry, Chloe. Easy. I never meant to hurt you." I kicked them both out that night. The fallout was catastrophic, but not in the way you might expect. Instead of rallying around me, my family gathered around to protect Savannah. My mother, Brenda, called me the next morning, not to comfort me, but to deal with the public relations disaster. "Chloe, my darling, you have to be the most important person here," my mother pleaded over the phone, her voice dripping with that manipulative sweetness she used when she wanted to get her way. "Savannah's carrying our first grandchild. Liam will do right, marry her. The bridesmaids are already paid for the Resorna estate. The caterer, the flowers, the band. It would be a shame to ruin it all. Let them take care of the wedding." I was disgusted. They stole my life, Mom. And now, You want them to steal my wedding day? Don't be dramatic, my father said in the background. It's just a party. Your sister needs it right now, period. I refused to give them my blessing, but legally, the contracts for the venue and the caterer were signed by my parents. They simply transferred the names. Savannah was going to have my venue, my menu, and my flowers, period, but the final insult, the absolute stab in the heart, came 3 weeks before their stolen wedding comb. My mother showed up at my cramped new apartment with a look of pure despair. Savannah, in her delicate state of pregnancy, was having a breakdown because she couldn't find a dress she liked on such short notice. She wants your dress, Chloe, my mother said, looking everywhere but at my face. Mrs. Gable says she can alter it to fit her curves. We'll give you your money back. Of course.
Please.
She's family. I laughed until I cried. It was so absurd, so profoundly sociopathic, that I couldn't even process the anger anymore. I went to my closet. I opened the pristine white garment bag and threw it at my mother's feet. Take it, I said. My voice was weak. Take everything. But know this. I will come to this wedding. I want a front row seat to witness this wreckage. Saturday, October 14th. The day I was supposed to become Mrs. Liamet Ahmet. Instead, I woke up alone in my one-bedroom apartment. I poured myself a cup of painfully strong black coffee and began preparing myself to witness my own nightmare. It wasn't until people asked me why I went, why I put myself through such psychological torture. My friends, especially my best friend Anna, who had given up being Savannah's borrowed bridesmaid in protest, begged me not to go. Not to go, begged me. We could go to the spa, get drunk, throw darts at a photo of Liam's face, anything but go to the estate in Sornoane, period, but I had to go. If I stayed home, I'd be the broken, soulless ex-fiancé crying in the dark. I needed him to see me. I needed him to look me in the eye and feel the weight of what they'd done. Period. I chose my outfit with deadly precision. I wore a custom-tailored floor-length emerald green dress. Yes. It wasn't white or eye-catching, but it fit me like a glove and made my burnt-out hair stand out. I wore my grandmother's ruby earrings, bright red lipstick, and a suit of pure aphid armor. Period. When I arrived at the Horon's estate, the air changed. The chatter of the guests grew louder as I walked through the manicured gardens toward the outdoor living room. Period. I saw familiar faces, aunts, uncles, mutual friends, all eyeing me with a sickening mix of pity and morbid fascination. I caught a glimpse of Beatrice, a notoriously brutal woman who had openly condemned my parents for this circus, and she gave me a subtle nod of respect. I bypassed the usher and took my place in the third row, directly down the aisle. At the groom's end, Liam already stood before the hotel. He was wearing the grey tuxedo we had picked out together. Period. His best man, his brother, Greg, stood beside him, who wouldn't even look me in the eye. Liam was pale. He looked like a man being led to the gallows, nervously adjusting his cuffs, shifting his weight, scanning the crowd until his eyes finally settled on me. He froze. I didn't glare. I didn't cry. I just gave a small, terribly calm smile. He swallowed. His Adam's apple bobbed, and he quickly looked away. His face flushed a deep crimson. Then the string quito began to play, Canon in D. My song. The guests stood. I sat a moment longer than the others, and just to make a point to intimate. Before I stood slowly at the back of the aisle stood my father, looking painfully proud, and Savannah. When I saw him, a strange, hysterical laugh welled up in the back of my throat. She wore my dress, yet it no longer resembled my dress. Period. Savannah is shorter than me and has a completely different build. Period. Even with Mrs. Gable's emergency alterations, the dress didn't fit her at all. The delicate lace sleeves meant to gracefully drape over her shoulders were stretched across her arms. Period. The bodyism source to accommodate her early pregnancy had completely lost its elegant structure and looked chubby and heavy. The train trailed awkwardly because she had refused to hem it. Wanting to take full advantage of the dramatic effect. Period. She looked like a child playing dress up in her mother's closet. Period. She began to walk down the aisle, beaming, soaking up the attention like a sponge. She looked so triumphant, so utterly convinced that she had won the ultimate prize. But then the twist happened. I shifted my gaze from the imposter in white to the hotel. I wanted to see Liam's face as his bride approached. I expected to see tears of joy, or maybe that look of admiration that brides and grooms get in the movies. None of that happened. I saw a man in the throes of an internal psychological breakdown. As Liam watched Savannah approach him in my dress, the reality of the situation visibly hit him like a freight train. The dress wasn't just a piece of clothing. It was a ghost. It was the physical manifestation of the woman he'd spent 5 years building his life with. He saw the lace we'd talked about. He saw the silhouette that was meant for me. Savannah was halfway down the aisle, her smile faltering slightly when she noticed Liam wasn't smiling back. Liam's eyes drifted away from Savannah's face. He looked past her. He looked at my father. His eyes locked with mine, standing a few feet away, in the third row. And in that moment, the entire facade crumbled. There was no love in his eyes as he looked at me. There was pure terror, wrapped in stifling regret. His mask fell completely. I saw the memories flashing behind his eyes. Our apartment, our dog, our peaceful Sunday mornings. The life he had thrown away for a fleeting thrill and an unplanned pregnancy. And she looked at me as if he was drowning and I was the only lifeboat in the ocean, but I stood safely on the shore, my hands in my pockets, watching him sink. Savannah reached the hotel. My father placed his hand in Liam's. Liam flinched. He didn't look at him as he took his hand. He kept his eyes fixed on the ground. Breathing heavily, Savannah, clearly annoyed by his lack of enthusiasm, shook his hand abruptly, muttering something through gritted teeth, officiating Mahdian, a committed professional who had no idea of the radioactive drama unfolding before him, cleared his throat and began. We are gathered here today to witness the union of Liam and Savannah. The ceremony was a disaster of unspoken tension. When it came time to deliver the vows, Liam's voice trembled so much that he had to try twice. It sounded hollow. Savannah, on the other hand, delivered her vows as if she were auditioning for a soap opera, loud and overly dramatic, constantly glancing sideways in my direction to make sure I was watching. I was looking at a man who had realized he had locked himself in a prison of his own making. But what none of us knew, not me, not Liam, not my parents, was that the real explosion had yet to happen. The dress was just the appetizer. Point had brought a nuclear bomb to her own wedding and the countdown was on, until the reception. The reception took place in the estate's grand ballroom, a breathtaking space with crystal chandeliers, floor-to-ceiling windows, and a polished chain dance floor. Everything was exactly as I had designed it. Down to the last napkin ring. The floral centerpieces, with their cascading white orchids and dark green ivy, were handpicked by me. The cocktails that passed around on silver platters were what Liam and I had spent the afternoon testing. I felt like I was walking through a museum exhibit of my own stolen future. Savannah, in a spectacular display of pettiness, had assigned me to table 19. It was tucked into the darkest corner of the room, wedged aggressively between the swinging kitchen doors and the passageway to the bathroom. My table mates were our socially awkward little cousin Toby, who asked me every who of 5 minutes if I was okay, and 3 of distant relatives who had clearly not been privy to the family drama and kept asking me how I knew the bride. I'm her sister, I replied offhandedly to a bewildered granddaughter and the groom's ex-fiancé and him. The salmon is excellent, isn't it? The atmosphere in the room was fragile. You could feel the collective anxiety emanating from the guests, and the first dance was painful to watch. Liam moved like a rusty iron man, keeping Savannah at a polite distance as she overthought, flashing a bright smile at the wedding videographers. My parents, Salem and Brenda, worked the room like damage control politicians, laughing too loudly and constantly emphasizing the brilliance of Savannah's pregnancy to distract from the groom's palpable misery. Then came the speeches. The best man delivered a tight 2-minute toast that sounded more like a quarterly company report than a celebration of love. He wished them health and efficiency and practically ran back to his seat. My father followed suit, launching into an emotional, rambling monologue about how Savannah had always been his little princess who deserved a fairy tale, who deserved a fairy. I took a slow sip of my champagne, feeling the bubbles sting the back of my throat, which had been stinging during the toasts, a dangerous wedding tradition under the best of circumstances, as the atmosphere went from uncomfortable to nuclear. The digi, a certain one who looked far too young to handle such a hostile crowd, asked if anyone wanted the microphone. For a moment, there was only the tinkle of silver tricycles, and then the heavy doors at the back of the ballroom slammed open. The noise echoed over the quiet murmur of the room. All heads turned. Point, standing in the doorway, was a man who, it was obvious, had no business at a black tie evening. He wore a faded leather jacket, dark jeans, and boots that looked like they had been worn in every bar in Chicago. Pointel was tall, chaotically. He was a bartender and aspiring musician who Savannah had been seeing on and off for the past 2 years. My parents hated him because he had no trust fund or prestigious degrees, and Savannah treated him terribly, pulling his leg whenever she needed an ego boost. Cameron didn't wait to be escorted out. He walked right past him, horrified, his eyes fixed on the head table where Savannah was sitting. Savannah's face drained of all color. It turned pure white, blending in with the torn chiffon of my stolen wedding dress. She jumped up from her chair. "Security!" she screamed, her voice cracking with panic. "Get him out of here!" Right away. But Cameron was already at the digi booth. He snatched the wireless microphone from Wayada's hands before the poor kid could even process what was happening. "Don't worry, Mum, I'm not staying for the cake. Cameron's voice boomed through the ballroom speakers, harsh and dripping, vision whipping with venom. The entire room fell into a deathly silence, paralyzed to the point where even the catering staff froze. Trays of Buff Wellingtons in hand, Cameron turned to face the crowd, brandishing a thick paper envelope. "I just wanted to drop off a little wedding gift, Shile? Savannah told me she was cutting ties with me a few months ago because she finally found a guy with a real salary." He pointed at Liam, who, staring at him in utter confusion. "Congratulations on the promotion, buddy." "Mick off," my mother yelled, rushing forward. But Cameron just ducked. "But that's a funny story," Cameron continued, his voice rising in anger. "A few weeks ago, Savannah came to my apartment crying, told me she needed a swab as well. It was for a medical history for the baby. I'm not an idiot, I'm duksht. That's what a non-invasive prenatal paternity test is. She paid for the VIP fast track because she needed to be sure before she walked down the aisle today." The silence in the room was so deep you could hear the hum of the air conditioner. "She told me the results proved the baby was Liam's and she gave me dollars to lose her number," Cameron said. His voice cracked slightly before hardening again. "But Savannah has always been careless. The clinic emailed the results to the backup contact. Me." He walked over to the head table. "You." Slammed the envelope right in the center of Savannah's untouched wedding cake and leaned into the microphone one last time. "You can keep the $10,000, Savannah, but you're not taking my child from me. See you in family court." He dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a thud that made half the room wince. Cameron turned and walked out the exact same way he'd come in, leaving utter devastation in his wake. For what seemed like an eternity, but was probably only 10 for 15 seconds, the grand ballroom of the estate had been a museum of shock. It was a tableau of sheer devastation, frozen in time. The thumping of the microphone still seemed to resonate in the attic, ringing in the ears of 200 breathless guests. No one dared to move. The waitstaff was completely paralyzed. Trays of expensive champagne and delicate hors d'oeuvres floated in the air. The stringed instrument in the corner came to an abrupt halt. The bow of assise, the violin, hovered inches from the strings. All that could be heard was the mechanical hum of the industrial air conditioning and the panicked, ragged breathing of my sister at the head table. Period. The epicenter of the destruction was the 4-tiered vanilla bean wedding cake that I had painstakingly chosen months before. In the midst of those pristine white buttercream flowers was the paper envelope. It appeared to be a filthy foreign object, a grenade with its pin removed. Period. That's when everything started moving again. Liam reached for the envelope. Its movements were slow, unsteady, like someone waking up from a nightmare they couldn't completely escape. Her hand shook as she gripped the thick paper. Liam, no! Savant's voice cut through the silence, raw and desperate. She lunged for the table, trying to grab it. In her panic, her lace sleeve caught on a crystal glass point, and it shattered. The fabric ripped abruptly, but she didn't even notice. Don't read it. He's lying. He made it all up. Liam didn't answer. He shoved her away with ease, stepping back as if she no longer existed. Without hesitation, he tore open the envelope, smearing cake frosting over the document inside. From my place in the shadows, I watched her face. I knew every expression, every emotion. But this was different. This was collapse. Her eyes scanned the page, then the next one. And confusion came first, her eyebrows twitching as if the words made no sense. Then doubt, his gaze on Savannah, searching for something. Anything to refute what he saw, but he found only fear, period, and that was enough. The truth hit him all at once. His face emptied, leaving it hollow, almost translucent. The child was not his. Everything he had justified, every choice, every betrayal had been built on a lie, period, and she was not a man who did the right thing. He was a fool who had been fooled, period. The paper slipped from his fingers, landing among the spilled orange and broken glass. Liam, please! Savannah collapsed to her knees, clutching at him. Mascara streaked her face, staining the ruined dress. Can I explain? I thought it was yours. I swear. I love you. But Liam didn't move. He just stood there, staring into space as his world slowly crumbled. I'm not your husband, Liam said. His voice wasn't a scream. It was a terrifying, somehow husky whisper. He walked across the room, breathless. He looked at her with such disgust that my stomach tightened. He looked at her like she was a poisonous insect that had crawled onto his shoe. He reached for his lapel and his fingers found the white orchid boutonniere, the one I'd chosen. He ripped it off, tearing a small hole in the expensive fabric of the tuxedo and dropped it into Savannah's lap. Don't ever contact me again. Don't call me. Don't text me. Don't stay away from me. He turned his back on his sobbing fiancée and began to walk away. But my father, Salem, suddenly snapped out of his shock. His face flushed a deep, dangerous purple. She circled the table, her chest puffed out, desperate to maintain the illusion of control around which he had built his entire identity. Liam, my son? Wait a minute, Abu Salam. In his authoritative business manager voice. He reached out to grab Liam's shoulder. Let's all go into the private bridal suite and discuss this like rational men, Wanika. We can settle this peacefully. Touch me, Salem, and I swear to God I'll have you arrested for assault. Liam growled as he turned, his voice finally cracking with pure unfeigned rage. The venom in its time was like a physical blow, period. My father backed away. His hands went up in surrender. His mouth opened and closed like a beached fish. You and your psychopathic daughter can rot. Liam turned and began a long walk toward the center of the ballroom, heading straight for the massive chain-link doors Cameron had exited through. And the guest's mother physically parted for him, people pushing their chairs in to avoid being in his range. As he neared the back of the room, he had to walk past the table. My table. He stopped to point at the momentum of his exit stopped completely. He looked at me, sitting in my emerald green dress, nestled in the shadows. For a long, silent moment, the rest of the room faded. It was just the two of us, staring at each other through the wreckage he had created, and it looked utterly shattered. The cocky confidence of the man who had sat on my couch a few months ago, calmly explaining that he was in love with my sister, had completely disappeared. His eyes were rimmed with red, swimming in a terrifying, suffocating realization of what he had thrown away. She opened her mouth, her jaw trembling. I saw the apology forming on his lips. I saw the desperate, drowning plea for a lifeline. I didn't give him one. I didn't smile or frown. I slowly raised my half-empty glass of champagne. I tipped it toward him in a silent, mocking toast. I took a slow sip and held his gaze with eyes of absolute ice. The finality of that gaze destroyed whatever strength he had left. His shoulders slumped. A sob escaped his throat and he broke eye contact, consumed by his own shame. She stepped through the swinging doors and disappeared into the cool October night. The second the heavy doors slammed shut behind him, the ballroom's charm filled. The silence shattered into a million pieces of chaotic manic energy. The room exploded as Beatrice, sitting 2 tables away from me, slammed her hand on the table and yelled at a passing waiter. "Get me a pair of toned jeans right now. I need a drink to go with this show, period." At the head table, Brenda was screaming. She was yelling at the dig, to turn on some music, at the catering staff to clear the room, and at my dad to do something, period. Savannah was still on the floor, curled up in the fetal position, screaming into the tattered fabric of my wedding dress. Her carefully curated influencer life was turning to ash around her, period. The guests were whispering with frantic speed, reaching for their phones to send messages to all their contacts, taking secret photos of the disaster, period. I set my glass of champagne down on the table, period. The show was over and the bad guys had just taken their final bows. I stood up calmly. I ironed the skirt of my lovely green dress and took my clutch. I leaned over and planted a kiss on my cousin Toby's sweaty, terrified cheek. Massage. "Enjoy the beef Wellington, Toby," did I whisper, period. I turned my back on my screaming mother, my sobbing sister, and my humiliated father. And I walked out of the ballroom. As I walked through the heavy wooden doors and into the crisp, cool autumn air, I took a deep breath, period. For the first time in 18 months, the air tasted incredibly sweet, period. I walked to my car, the noise of chaos fading, and I drove off into the night. They say living well is the best revenge. But whoever coined that phrase severely underestimated the sheer, intoxicating satisfaction of watching karma unfold. Meticulously dismantling a toxic family dynamic, brick by brick over months, I survived on pure adrenaline and righteous indignation. But after I closed the door on Liam that night and walked away from the buzzing intercom, something shifted inside me permanently. Not the heavy, suffocating fog of betrayal that had settled over my chest since the day I found them in my living room. It finally evaporated. I wasn't just free from a cheating, wanton fiancé. I was free from the entire twisted ecosystem of my family. I had been playing a rigged game my entire life, and I finally realized that the only way to win was to flip the game board, and leave. I poured every last bit of energy I had into my career. The anger that kept me up at night turned into fuel. 1 months after that disastrous marriage, my agency was competing for a massive rebranding campaign for a Silicon Valley tech startup expanding into Chicago. I spearheaded the pitch, period. I worked 80-hour weeks, channeling my hyper-focus on creative. We didn't just win the job, we dominated it. It did. My boss, a tough woman who rarely gave compliments, called me into her office and promoted me to creative director of shampoo. Thanks to my new salary and a substantial bonus, I decided to completely break off my plans with Liam. I moved out of my cramped and depressing 1-bedroom apartment and bought a gorgeous historic loft in West Lock that featured exposed brick walls, exposed beams, and a storied historic building. Wood and huge floor-to-ceiling windows, period. From day one, Buster, my chaotic rescue dog, claimed the prime spot of the sunbeam on the Moroccan rug, period. It was a sanctuary I had built entirely by myself, with no memory of anyone else. Meanwhile, the universe was aggressively and ruthlessly reclaiming its rightful place from everyone who had wronged me, period. And the downfall of my sister Savannah was a masterclass in public humiliation. The leaked video of Cameron's speech at the reception didn't just sit on a few local sites, it became a viral sensation. A major drama channel on YouTube picked it up, analyzing every pixel of Savannah's beast face and Liam's cowardly exit. She's relentlessly dubbed. The comment sections on her Instagram, once filled with sycophantic lodges, became an absolute war zone. Cameron didn't just disappear into the night. He, hiring a remarkably capable attorney, he brought the case to family court, aiming for a joint custody arrangement. Since my parents had depleted their cash flow in the unpayable disaster of the Rourn estate, he couldn't afford the high-powered shark lawyers he usually relied on to get him out of trouble. Cameron easily won Savannah's day. The golden boy who would cry if a waiter used almond milk instead of oat milk was now attached to the man she had publicly called a peasant scum. Learned through rumors from my cousin Toby, who loved to text me to keep me updated on the situation, that Savannah had been forced to get a real job to pay her legal fees and mounting credit card debt. She's currently employed as a receptionist at a very busy suburban dental practice. She spends 40 hours a week wearing shapeless burgundy overalls, answering phones and getting yelled at by patients, irritable, suffering from damn point aches, and there's no ring of light, no free PR offer, no gilded pedestal, just the harsh, fluorescent light of reality. My parents, Salem and Brenda, didn't fare much better. Their social exile in their affluent, status-obsessed community was absolute and unrelenting. You can survive many scandals in high society, but you can't survive the public humiliation and financial domination of a leather-jacketed bartender. Shame clings to them like a bad smell. Brenda was quietly, but firmly, asked Dusna to step down from the country club's Bumna Emptying committee. The whispers followed them everywhere. Friends he'd known for decades suddenly stopped returning their calls. Dinner invitations dried up completely. The financial reality of their choice hit them even harder. Hans' estate, the 5-star catering service dishes, the open bar, the imported flower arrangements, all of this was non-refundable. Point is, when you add Savannah's legal fees and the absolute destruction of their social status, they could no longer maintain their lifestyle. They were forced to downsize in an awful, humiliating way. They sold the large house I grew up in and auctioned off half of their antique furniture. They moved to a much smaller, cookie-cutter apartment in a completely different, middle-class suburb where no one knew their names, effectively erasing themselves from the map they used to rule. Then there was his pathetic attempts on the intercom. He tried to contact me 3 more times. He sent a huge bouquet of white roses to my office, which I promptly handed over to the building's janitor. He wrote a desperate 6-page handwritten letter detailing his lack of judgment and begging for a second chance, which I used to wallpaper the back of the Buster case. That was when he finally realized that my silence was a permanent wall. He spiraled downwards. She had moved into a sterile, depressing corporate apartment complex, drowning in debt from the lease on the luxury home he had rented for his stolen family. But the real blow came to his career, and the structural engineering firm he worked for was a tight-knit old-school outfit where reputation and integrity were paramount. While his bosses couldn't technically fire him for his disastrous personal life, the disrespect of his co-workers had become a toxic cloud from which he could not escape. He had proven himself to be a man capable of cold-bloodedly betraying his partner 5 years, blindly agreeing to raise a child without question, and then running away at the slightest sign of public embarrassment. No one wanted to partner with him on projects. No one invited him for drinks after work. Incapable of dealing with the hostile environment he himself had created, Liam eventually quit. He moved to a smaller, less prestigious firm in a dreary town in the West, taking a massive pay cut just to escape the ghosts of Chicago. He left empty-handed, with no wife, no fiancé, no respect, and no future. I haven't spoken to a single one of them in over a year. I changed my phone number, aggressively blocked their emails, and set ironclad boundaries. Last week, while spring cleaning my loft, I found the garment I found the garment bag in the back of my closet. I opened it and pulled out the custom-made chiffon dress. It was a tragic sight, period. The collar was still stained with Savannah's orange range foundation, and the delicate lace sleeves were permanently warped and torn from being stretched over her arms, period. She was the physical casualty of a war I never asked for to lead, period. But as I stood there, in the sunlight running my fingers over the ruined fabric, I realized something incredible. I didn't feel angry, I didn't feel sad, I didn't feel anything at all. The dress was just fabric, period. I packed it in a cardboard box and took it to a local theater company. Why, period. They told me they were putting on an avant-garde production of Friends and they desperately needed a tragic-looking ruined dress for the monster's bride. I smiled. I held out the box and told them it was perfect, period. I'm 30 now. I'm sitting on my velvet couch. I'm drinking a cup of perfect coffee and staring at the Chicago skyline. I've lost a fiancé, a sister, and 2 parents. But what I've gained is far more valuable than anything they've taken from me. I've gained absolute unwavering peace and, honestly, I have never been happier. Wow point. It's like the trash can is removing itself. Chloe's revenge wasn't about getting revenge. It was about getting enlightened and letting karma do the heavy lifting. And if you enjoyed seeing this toxic family get exactly what they deserved, hit the like button right now. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss an episode of the story. Share this video with a friend, and I'll see you next time.